I'm almost sorry we call it finishing or the back end or whatever you want to call it, because it's really the starting point. It's not the ending point. I mean, that's what happens at the end, but that's in your mind, that's the starting point. So you have to really consider what are the end products that I want to produce that are making money for my printing company. What are they? And not only what are they today, but what do we want them to become tomorrow?
What's up, everyone? It's Eric Vessels with Taktiful. Welcome back to Taktiful Tuesday. It's your weekly dose of print innovation, tactile storytelling, and conversations with people who are transforming how we see and feel the printed page. Today's guest is someone whose name is synonymous with leadership and longevity in the print world. Francis McMahon has spent over 3 decades helping shape the production print landscape, major chapters at Kodak, HP, and most recently Canon, where he spent 14 years leading marketing and strategy for their production print business. Along the way, he co-founded the Think community, became a vocal advocate for education, mentorship, and the power of print to surprise and engage. Now he's back in the game, one of those short semi-retirement things like what I did. He's president and CMO of TechNow, America's leading innovation in feeding and finishing solutions for digital print, including some seriously cool advancements in embellishment. Francis, welcome to the show, buddy.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you, Eric. Great to be here, and I'll be sending you a jet hat as soon as this is over.
Oh man, not the Jets thing again. Hey, listen,
Okay, we gotta have it. We gotta have it. But I think you're gonna have a good year, as I talked about. I think things are gonna work out very well for all the Steeler fans out there.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. We're so old, and it's like we're just putting off that rebuilding year. Like we don't like rebuilding years, but we also don't like mediocrity. So I feel like we've got to choose one or the other there at some point. But we'll see what happens. Exciting. We're getting ready to go into preseason, so football season's almost upon us as summer starts to
You know,
wane. Francis, great to have you on the show. Been definitely since I saw your return since leaving the industry, coming back in, have definitely reached out and wanted to get you on to have a conversation. So let's start it off. You've worked with some big players, right? Some time at Kodak, HP, Canon. What pulled you into the industry, and what made you stay for over 30 years now?
I did try to get out. It didn't work. But what pulled me in was right out of college. I always wanted to work for Eastman Kodak Company. Right, it was a big brand. It was in
Yeah.
Rochester, New York. I lived in Syracuse a long time, and I just wanted to be a part of Kodak. And you and I were talking earlier about manifesting things, and I'm a big believer in that. And sure enough, I put that out there, and Kodak started hiring. They bought IBM copier division.
Yep.
I'm going back to 1988, and I was graduating college, and they needed a lot of young people coming out of school to go sell copiers, and that was kind of the beginning of it all. And that transformed into wide format printing, production printing, and I was around when the first fiery controllers came out, and I think that's where the excitement was when I saw the power of what digital printing could be versus digital copying, and I think that's really what kept me in. And one thing kind of led to another. I was blessed at all three companies by being surrounded by some pretty incredible people that were just very motivated, taught me a lot, helped me along, showed me all the things that I really needed to get better at in order to further my career, and were good enough to work with me to get me to a better place. And
Yeah, it's usually that. What's that?
grateful I had that experience.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, I mean, it's usually about the people, right? And I think that's what's fun about being at this point in a career. Like you and you've been in the industry you were well established by the time I got there in like the early 2000s. But when you get to this stage of your career, it's kind of about being that mentor, right? And bringing people in and getting new people in there. And I know you're a big advocate of that. I want to talk a little bit about the Canon chapter. You played a really key role in launching toner devices, fifth and sixth color stations. Obviously, at Tactful, we're all focused on embellishments and how to kind of add pop to print and make it more tactile, make it more visually appealing. When you were at Canon, what were some of the things that you saw, creative possibilities that printers could unlock with just adding those color stations?
It's a great question, and I'm almost sorry we call it finishing or the back end or whatever you want to call it, because It's really the starting point. It's not the ending point. I mean, that's what happens at the end, but that's in your mind, that's the starting point. So you have to really consider what are the end products that I want to produce that are making money for my printing company. What are they? And not only what are they today, but what do we want them to become tomorrow? And really the first decision needs to be based on what my business is, what is going to allow me to produce that end product? And that's the starting point. It's not the finishing of the thought process. It's the beginning of the thought process. And then I think you work your way backwards, whether you're in direct mail or you're in some type of e-commerce printing or specialty printing, transactional printing, it doesn't matter. That should be the starting point. And then you work your way back into the press side and make sure that these presses are easily connected to these type of products you were just talking about a moment ago, and all the different finishing capabilities that are out there, that they're capable of going into the future. And ink and paper types become very important, and that all of that is tested and it's certified, and off you go. And I think too often, and I said this when I was at Canon and HP too often you start with a printing press, where really you need to start with what you're selling your customer and work your way back in to make sure that you can put together a solution.
I was gonna joke that as you were talking, I was like, I'm gonna make a joke about this, but then you added that you had this philosophy both at HP and Canon, which is true. But the joke is like you're fully assimilated into the finishing world because you're talking about begin with the end in mind. I was like, oh, they got him. They got him. He's in the finishing world
Yeah.
now. That's where his focus is. But no, really, I mean, when I worked with you at a little bit at HP and a lot at Canon, you did have that. Let's not just focus on that print engine. Let's take a holistic look and the partnerships you had at Canon with finishing folks, right? So you've had that philosophy for a while. So I let you off the hook on that one. But it is important, I think, to look at it holistically.
Yeah, and it's not even the like I've never really thought about technology that much, to be honest with you. It's my mantra has always been start with a customer and work your way back into the company. First, start with your company and work out to the customer. So if you start the process with, in this case, the very end customer, the consumer or the business that's actually using the printed piece, start there and then start working your way back into the company that's actually doing the printing, and then the companies that are providing the technology, and then the technology itself. So in many respects, I think the technology is kind of third in the thought process. The first thought process is how do we take care of the people that are using these printed products first, and work your way back into your company and your P&L and L and everything else you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, and you and I have known each other a long time. I think we're kind of kindred spirits in a lot of our thinking about business and print, but there's a lot of listening involved, right? Like there's that consultative sales, partnering and listening to that end customer. And if you're an OEM, listening to that printer who's listening to that end customer and be informed by that. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. Don't just be focused always on the technology. It's about how is that technology an enabler for those downline customers as we get to the end consumer. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Well, I think so much of the success at least HP and Canon when I was there was, the cultural shift of getting people out. So in order to make good decisions, to your point, you have to listen and you got to be in it and you got to be a part of it. And you got to sense and feel the industry. And you can't do that by sitting at home or sitting in an office. You got to get out. And by the way, I don't care if you're the CFO. It doesn't matter the job you're playing. But it was, I hate to use the word mandate because I'm not big on mandates, but I can't think of a better word. But it was a mandate of my staff, no matter what staff or what company, that you are in the field. It doesn't matter what role, because you're going to learn so much. You're going to bring it back, and we're going to be able to do a better job for those people. And this is part of the cultural shift I need to bring into TechNow. As there's just, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but we just need to be out more. We have to be out more. We have to get the relationships, and we have to listen.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you said I'm so glad you said relationships because I mean we talk about it. I talk about it a lot on this podcast with lots of my guests, and it comes up a lot of the people aspect and the fact that we don't really like companies don't really at the end of the day don't do business with other companies as people do business with people, right? Like they just happen to have a logo on their shirt and they just happen to work for a particular company, but at the end of the day it's about relationships, and you can't build those strong relationships if you're not out there doing it and seeing what's happening. But I'm glad you segued into tech now because that's where I want to go next, kind of talk about finishing strong. Well, we're not quite done, but we're halfway. I don't know if you know, these things tend to run like 20, 30 minutes, Francis. We might be here a while. So your focus is now on finishing. How do you see finishing? Because I made the argument the other day on a design meetup that folding and finishing was an embellishment. And there's like what do we call an embellishment? Is it an ink? Is it a foil? Is a spot UV? How do you see finishing impacting the final perception and value of a printed piece?
Well, I'll try not to be repetitive at all for you, Eric, but again, it's the starting point. It's a starting point for what the finished piece is. And then, when you start throwing in the creatives, people that do have a creative mind, the finished piece can become something more meaningful and more impactful. It can drive a different type of behavior. And I think today, as we look at more electronic ways of communicating, this physical, tangible product that we're all producing in our industry matters. And it does drive different behaviors. And we have to look at it differently. And we all have an obligation to really promote the power of print because it does do something differently. I'm in my office right now, my home office. I just got back from Andover, and you can just look over my shoulder and see the impact of these printed pieces. One thing you can't really see is articles from my 12-year-old all-star baseball team, that was printed in a newspaper and in frame. Like if it was never printed in that newspaper, I wouldn't even reflect back on those memories or have them. I've got my diplomas in back of me. I've got my wife's diplomas. I've got photographs. I've got a number of different books. I've got an article about my wife's yoga business that was done locally here in Boca Raton. I mean, these are things that matter. And if you look at each individual piece, just like the foil stamping on the diplomas, I mean, these are just works of art, really. You
Yeah,
know,
man.
the photo books, I mean, that are displayed behind me and just the memories that come with it. So I just think it's all so important. And I'm watching our younger generation starting to really embrace it more and more.
You know what? You make a great point because one of the things that we're seeing is there's kind of like these, you know, how pendulum swings, right? Like it'll swing hard one way, right? And everything's going digital, right? But in a world that is so digital, guess what can stand out even more? Print and tactile print, right? And the feeling of it, because you don't get a feeling, from digital media. You don't get a tactile feeling, and we talk a lot about, and we're writing about it all the time. Actually, working on a book. Can I tease that? I guess. Shoot, maybe I just did. Okay. But the point is like this tactile stuff creates emotions in people that are powerful, and that's really the power of print and the power of adding embellishments to it. The power of adding a cool finishing. I just saw a sample the other day where you just pull the edges and the whole thing, it's folded in this weird origami, but you pull it out and it just opens up and closes back, right? That's finishing. That's what finishing can add. And then the embellishment can add the touch feel. There was another one where it was like you open up a gatefold thing and you pull something down and it like had more information. Like those are the kinds of things that we can create like this discovery world through both tactile embellishments, but also how we think about finishing the piece. I think you're spot on. You can't really do that unless you've got a designer or creative or somebody that's like, hey, what if we did that? Okay, can we do that? And then you build it backwards to building it. So I see a lot of super interesting stuff. I know you probably followed super cool photo of the week, Trish Witkowski for years. Like she highlights
Yeah.
all of what you can do
Yeah,
in
I
your.
loved all of her stuff. I missed that. I thought she was spectacular. And you know what? I don't think I ever met her.
No way,
I know
man.
which is shocking to me. Like
And it's shocking to
I don't
me
want
as
to say
well
I know
because
everybody in the industry because that would be an exaggeration. You know,
Yeah, but
I
it's,
think
I
it,
mean, she's also, I feel like she's very much your tribe. So we have to facilitate that kind of meeting. But the point is, on the finishing side, is now you're leading in that space where there's a big opportunity to add more value on the back end. And hopefully, as you say, we can see it more holistically than the linear positions, right? See it more as like an entire thing. But that's where increasing the perception of a printed piece finishing has a huge role to play. And I think, I think you're probably seeing that and have seen it working on the print engine side. But maybe thoughts about where that's headed, and the excitement of what you're bringing to the industry through TechNow.
and I think, you bring up a great point. It's not all about putting and stacking and proofing. There's so much more, especially in the graphic arts world that we all live in. I think for tech now, I think that's a potential next step for us. How do we create more value with our partners, but also by ourselves to create technology that allows for the printed page to speak on its own? And I think that's kind of the direction. You said it, but there's just so much value. There's such a connection, and the word you used, which was so important, the emotions that go with it. And that's really the business we're in. And how do you create an emotional attachment to the products that are playing off of these devices? And it's important. There's so many things that I talked about just in my office here that I'm looking at that obviously there's an emotional attachment or I wouldn't have them. And how do we
Yeah,
continue moving that forward?
and that's, I mean, that's the real power that we've got to, the power of print that we have to remind ourselves of. And I'm learning more about this as I'm getting up to speed in the world of tactful and embellishments and whatnot, is that the more senses that you can impact on a human, the higher level of influence and the higher you can get them to have an emotional reaction, right? So if you think about what print obviously is touch, right? It's obviously on the eyes with great design and great color, maybe sometimes fifth and sixth color, but then it's also in the of what it is, sometimes even smell, right? So if we think about how to impact people with print, I think what needs to be foremost in our minds is how many senses can we impact to get someone to have that reaction. So I want to talk a little bit.
That's such an important point about that emotional attachment that you were talking about just a few moments ago. When you send something out, you want people to do something with it. You want
Yeah.
them to admire what it is, and you want to create some type of response, whatever that response is. The smell portion of what you just talked about, I'm seeing more and more of what's coming to us in the mail here at my home that allows for that to happen. And if you can touch it and feel it, it becomes so much more meaningful than just seeing. But all of the senses combined, I love what you're saying. And I think it's important. And as we build technology, how do we make sure that we can build capability to do exactly what you're talking about? I should be interviewing you today. You shouldn't be
Yeah,
interviewing me.
this is awesome. I mean, this is usually
You
how
love
it
it.
works. A free flowing thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, listen, I'll be on your podcast anytime. Just let me know. I want to talk a little bit about inkjet, though. I mean, you've been in that side, I mean, for a really long time. You helped position Canon really as a major force in production inkjet. What are some of the shifts that you've seen and how customers are approaching inkjet over the years, and where do you think it's going to continue to go? Going to continue to eat away at volumes of offset? Going to be, as I see it, just a part of the mix that's shifting around, or where do you give us some enlightenment about the inkjet side of our industry?
Well, what's been interesting to watch is how a lot of the offset manufacturers have been able to stay in the game and continue to create efficiencies with their technology and allow going back to the creatives to do more with offset. So
Yeah.
offset's here for a while, that's for sure. But and we all know this, as run lengths can to come down as products become more personalized, as you do add things like embellishment and try to reach an audience of one. It just makes sense to be able to do these type of printed products on devices that you can just you know, be able to print much faster, much more conveniently, and certainly at a cost that people can afford. And so this is where, the cost piece becomes very important, especially now with tariffs that are going on. which is creating havoc for all of us. It's been very difficult. In fact, I'm spending hours of every day focused on that and wasteful, quite frankly. I'm kind of angry about it, to be honest, but I won't go into a tariff discussion now. But, when you take into tariffs, you take into
It's complication.
why, right? Paper costs, hardware costs, postage costs, right? You can go on and on and on. And you've got these printing companies just trying to make a living and trying to generate a margin. So creating more value for the printed page and all the creative ideas you were just talking about earlier with embellishment as an example, the more pop you can create, the more value, and then our printing companies or providers are able to generate something that's more profitable for them, which is important. So inkjet allows for that to happen. So I think inkjet is a great technology that does enable, that does work very well with other types of finishing devices, allows for that creative engine to happen, and is certainly the technology as we move forward. We all know what happened with Lambda. Quite frankly, I hope that continues though in a good way for many, many, many different reasons, but I think it's important. But the more technology we continue to develop and the more that we can promote the value of print, I think the more successful we're all going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that mix. Like, I think printers have to learn, like, there's lots of cool stuff you could do with toner devices, right? And sleeking. There's lots of cool stuff you could do with inkjet and adding an embellishment after the fact. And there's lots of cool stuff you can still do, with offset and then add in all of the finishing that you can add. For me, it's about I hear and see printers like just getting a mix of equipment to be able to do the kinds of things they either are already in demand for or want to pursue, right? And so I've never viewed technology all my time in the industry as necessarily competitive, but finding how that they can be complementary, right? Big, huge, long runs of stuff that's just commercial, you put it on offset. There's a place for everything, and I think our mission really in the industry as a whole is exactly what you said. Find that mix of technology that will provide that end thing that excites the customer and gets them to see the value of print. And I think we're doing all right at that.
Well,
I
there's
want to talk
there's so much more innovation left, I think, for all of us.
a ton.
What's important, I mean, we all have businesses to run, right? We got to focus on our P&L, and okay, that's fine, but we have to spend as much time or more focused on the health of the industry. So, and I talk about this a lot, but the pie is really small. And for everybody to be fighting for such a small piece of the pie, our job is to grow the
The pie.
value of communications. And
Yeah.
once we grow the value of print communications, we can all start worrying more about what pieces we grab. But that's the promotion. The promotion all needs to be on the print side. And again, work your way back into the companies that you're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking people, you've always been a really strong advocate for education and mentorship. I know you've done some mentoring. I've done some mentoring. Why do you think this industry depends so heavily on community and shared knowledge?
No, that's such a great question. We've become accepting of other people's ability to influence us in a positive way, which wasn't always the case.
I like that.
There's a lot of egos out there, but if you just check it at the door for a minute and you become very humble and you really look in the mirror and think about all the things you're really good at, but then all the things you're not very good at, and quite frankly, you may never be really good at, or you just don't understand. And you place value in that. And you go find people and surround yourself with people that are good at all the things you're not good at. And are just so much smarter than you in so many other ways. And you bring all of them together. That's where the magic, I mean, it truly is magical, but that's where the big ideas tend to boil up to the top. And I think so many people have in their hearts this ability to be humble, and they understand what I just said, which then brings them together in a way where we can all support each other. And going back to the pie, they all recognize, they're smart enough to recognize that we need to grow the pie in order for all of us to be successful. And it's really interesting for me too, like running around D-Scoop and Think as an example, or Printing United, or the Inkjet Summit, or and ING, or I hope I didn't really leave anybody out there, but to see the
I was like,
people
now
that,
that you're listing them off, we're gonna forget somebody.
but you see the people that don't get it, that don't belong, but they showed up because they felt like they needed to, or they wanted a trip to a great place. Who knows why some of them, but they're so out of place. And they're so out of place because they're so narcissistic. They can't appreciate that all these other people will be able to provide some value, or that what they know internally is just so much more important, or so much more educated than everybody else. And those people just don't belong. And I feel sorry for those people. And you've watched how those people, their businesses have closed, or they haven't been as successful, or they
Right.
haven't been able to surround themselves with this community.
Well, I've seen it work the other way too. I've seen those types also get involved in a community like a D-Scoop or like a Think and sort of transition themselves. But I think you're 100% right. Like back in the day, I remember when I first came into the industry, everything was just proprietary and oh, that's proprietary and you
Right.
can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. And now I think we're in a much better place of like, well, no, it's really not proprietary, right? So let's talk about it. Let's educate one another so that, it's the rising tides metaphor of all the ships, or in your metaphor, growing a bigger pie. Because if we all grow the pie together, guess what happens to our slice? It gets bigger. So I think it's a good thing. Good thinking. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I missed my first think in a long time and was sad. I know that you missed your first think in a long time, but it's become a big part of that whole inkjet ecosystem, and you were a big part of making that happen. What inspired its creation, and did you expect it to grow the way that it did? Because it really, really has. It's hands down top three events that I used to go to, and it's not close. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the one hallmark of both Dscoop and Think, and I consider it part of your legacy, if you'll humbly accept that, is the community and the learning. Like just sitting around at lunch listening to people talk. Like there was that, hey, you got this, are you struggling with this thing? Oh yeah, we did one thing for right. And that is just awesome to see. And I think that's really the future of the industry, is building more and more community, more and more education to raise our collective knowledge base so that we're able to produce the best print possible. All right, here's where we shift gears. We're gonna wrap it up. Outside of the industry, I think a lot of people already kind of know. There's some people that know. What do you do to reset, find inspiration, like hobbies, routines, places that ground you, things that you do outside of talking about inkjet print or finishing? I mean, we know music, lots of concerts. Yeah, man, I mean, that's definitely community. Like I think seeking out like niche communities is super interesting. I encourage everyone to sort of do it. I'm kind of on the heavy music side of the scene, so I'm currently in a bit of mourning over Ozzy's passing, as Black Sabbath definitely spawned that genre like the year that I was born. But yeah, I love that because the Grateful Dead. I in college had a tape trader buddy that was he had, I think, thousands of different tapes, and I was always just fascinated, like, but that's the same music on all of the tapes. It's the same music, but it's all different because they're all different shows, live recorded. But the community that surrounded the Grateful Dead has always amazed me, and I think we can learn a lot of lessons. And obviously, you have and have brought it into the printing industry, so that's awesome. Congratulations! I'm glad you guys are going. That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, we're going to be on the lookout for what TechNow does, what you're doing. Glad to see you back in the industry. It's wonderful. Hopefully, we will cross paths. We'll for sure see each other. I would think at Printing United or some other places. Uh, thanks, buddy. Thanks for being on the show. Love you too. See ya.